Ever since his first election in 2016, people on the internet have suggested that Donald Trump is a Caesarian figure, that he is another coming of Julius Caesar, as it were, following Oswald Spengler's idea of Caesarism in his The Decline of the West, der Untergang des Abendlandes, perhaps better translated as the going down of the land of the evening. With his artful comeback, and one has to hand it to him, it was quite a masterpiece, and he had written the script for it decades ago with his The Art of the Comeback. Donald Trump's, again, owning the imagination of the globe. And one can see the suggestion that he is indeed the Caesarian figure that the West or even the world has been waiting for. Now, what is it that Oswald Spengler has in mind with the figure of Caesar, and could we think of Trump as a Caesarian figure? What I'm about to say about Trump and Spengler is without any value judgment. This is neither an endorsement of Trump, nor is it a rebuttal of Trump, nor is this to say that he is going to be a dictator, anything of the sort. This is a factual look and a comparison of the paradigm of Caesarism that Spengler sets out, and considering what Trump has been doing thus far and what he might be up to in the future, so that we get an understanding of where we stand in terms of our civilization in the West, and in terms also of the geopolitical situation which we now find ourselves in, based on Spengler's ideas. Let me briefly summarize how Spengler understands history and also where we stand in terms of our own history as it unfolds in the West. Spengler bases his philosophy of history on two main thinkers, on Goethe, and specifically on Goethe's Metamorphosis, as we can find it also explicated, for example, in Die Wahlverwandtschaften, Elective Affinities, and of course on Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, and on Nietzsche's will to power more specifically. Just to mention this also, Spengler did understand his book, The Decline of the West, or The Going Down of the Land of the Evening, as not just a pure or mere description of what's happening, but in fact as a guidebook or a guideline for politics, for how to do politics. He is considered the founder of the conservative revolution in Germany, which also spread across Europe at the time. And so he did believe, or did want, his writings to be guidebooks, as perhaps also Carl Schmitt saw his concept of the political, for example. Now, simply put, and this is perhaps a bit of an oversimplification, but we can say that with Spengler understands the shape of history as follows. Every great culture that has an impact on world history, according to Spengler, follows the 4 seasons of the year. In its spring, there's a great fire that burns, and the culture is being born. It is alive, and it flourishes, and it brings forth, or it begins to bring forth, its own greatness. Summer is, for example, in Europe would be the Baroque time, is a time when there is full blossoming, full blooming of the great sparks of the seeds that have been sown in spring. Autumn, however, look at just at our time, is then the time of reflection. It's already beginning to look back. This is what, according to Spengler, begins with around the Enlightenment and after. So there's a moment of critique. It's no longer fresh. We are moving already into fall. We are reaping what we have sown, but there's no longer in this great culture the spark left to really produce something of its own, something great and new, really. It is a time of reflection. By the way, Plato and Aristotle would be for Spengler parallel in their own time to this time of the Enlightenment. So even the great philosophers, as we think of them perhaps sometimes, are, according to Spengler, not really that. They are no longer foundational. Really, they are already in the age of reflection. Now, once the great culture, or a great culture, has gone through its phase of autumn, it's moving into, and irrevocably so, it's moving into winter. And we are now children of winter. In the winter phase, there's nothing new that can be done. And what occurs is that what was culture for Spengler moves into the phase of civilization. So those of you who are perhaps English native speakers, when you speak of civilization, sometimes maybe you mean technology, technological tool use. Maybe you think of civilization as a continuum beginning 6,000 years ago with agriculture, etc. This is not what Spengler means by it. He means something very specific. Zivilisation, just to use the German pronunciation, civilization is when the great culture has basically spent itself and it moves into a technicized museal era, during which nothing new is being brought forth. There's more critique, perhaps, of the past, as we know there is. Our great cultural achievements are now stored in warehouses that we call museums, and we wander through them as if through a metaphysical supermarket, but we don't bring forth anything new. And this civilizational phase, this phase of winter, however, is probably the longest phase. As Nietzsche says, the last man lives longest. And what occurs right at the same time is the rule of democracy. And democracy, according to Spengler, is basically the rule of money. During democracy, money rules using democracy as its tool. So here's a quote from Volume 2 of The Decline of the West by Spengler. If by democracy we mean the form which the Third Estate as such wishes to impart to public life as a whole, it must be concluded that democracy and plutocracy are the same thing, under the two aspects of wish and actuality, theory and practice, knowing and doing. It is the tragic comedy of the world improvers and freedom teachers' desperate fight against money, that they are ipso facto assisting money to be effective. Respect for the big number, expressed in the principles of equality for all, natural rights and universal suffrage, is just as much a class ideal of the unclassed as freedom of public opinion, and more particularly freedom of the press, is so. These are ideals, but in actuality the freedom of public opinion involves in preparation of public opinion, which costs money. And the freedom of the press brings with it the question of possession of the press, which again is a matter of money. And with a franchise comes electioneering, in which he who pays the piper calls the tune. The representatives of the ideas look at one side only, while the representatives of money operate with the other. The concepts of liberalism and socialism are set in effective motion only by money. The Jacobins had destroyed the old obligations of the blood and so had emancipated money. Now it stepped forward as a lord of the land. There is no proletarian, not even a communist movement, that has not operated in the interest of money, in the directions indicated by money and for the time being permitted by money, and that without the idealists among its leaders having the slightest suspicion of the fact. The great movement, which makes use of the catchwords of Marx, has not delivered the entrepreneur into the power of the worker, but both into that of the boss. So, according to Spengler, money rules by democracy, by using great ideals of equal rights and equal voting rights, equality before the law, etc., to conceal the fact that who is really in charge are secretive guilds and the merchant class. Now, mind you, that the merchant class does, of course, profit from, let's say, free trade, which includes, of course, open borders, but we should also be aware that the merchants, while they do the merchant class, in general, a merchant class requires some chaos, but also a certain amount of stability. And what America has been going through for the past decade or longer is a time, and so has the rest of the West, a time of great instability. And this great instability may now be brought to heat again. It may now be brought under order again with Trump. So now the question is Trump the candidate of money, or is he a Caesarian figure? Because a Caesarian figure is supposed to break the rule of money. Here's another quote by Spengler. The coming of Caesarism breaks with the dictator of money and its political weapon democracy. After a long triumph of world city economy, world cities, just to mention this, you could think of the city of London, New York City, and I mean specifically, of course, Wall Street. So a long triumph of world city economy and its interest over political creative force, the political side of life manifests itself, after all, as the stronger of the two. The sword is victorious over the money, the master will subdues again the under will. If we call these money powers capitalism, then we may designate as socialism the will to call into life a mighty political economic order that transcends all class interest, a system of lofty thoughtfulness and duty sense that keeps the whole in one condition for the decisive battle of its history, and this battle is also the battle of money and law. The private powers of the economy want free paths for the acquisition of great resources. No legislation must stand in their way. They want to make the laws themselves in their interests, and to that end they make use of the tool they have made for themselves, democracy, the subsidized party. Law needs, in order to resist this onslaught, a high tradition and an ambition of strong families that finds its satisfaction in the upheaping of riches. So we can see that, again, what Spengler foresees, simply put, is that a Caesarian figure in politics slashes the rule of money. Caesar, or a Caesarian figure, or Caesarism, means the end of ideology, an ethic of a pure will to power for the sake of the populace, to bring order and stability again, to bring almost, you could say, world peace without any greater ideology, for the sake, again, of the people, and breaking the rule of money. Now the question is, does Trump in fact have that in mind, or is that what Trumpism will amount to? Will Trumpism, if we want to refer to it as in this manner, be able to break the rule of money, or does not Trumpism, given that he was supported by the richest men in the world and other multi-billionaires, is he in fact not also, even though he himself is perhaps wealthy enough to pay for his own campaign, is he not in cahoots with money? And this question remains to be seen, to be answered in the next 4 years. According to Spengler, for example, Cecil Rhodes was a Caesarian figure, a multi-millionaire, or in today's terms multi-billionaire, who had underlings. He was basically a feudal lord who his people were loyal to him. He built his own small empire. So there can be small little Caesarian figures around in different areas. And I think also, for example, that Caesarian figures will rise in the area of education and learning. And we should also see that perhaps someone like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel are akin to Caesarian figures in this regard. And now, however, comes perhaps the more pressing question, which is that Spengler is mindful of the threats of technocracy. So a genuine Caesarian figure will have to break with not just the rule of money, but with the rule of technics. And this remains to be seen, whether or not it is Trump, but whether there will be Caesarian figures that break the rule of burgeoning technocracy, the reign of AI data-driven surveillance in, as they call it, real time, etc. This is what a future Caesarian figure will actually have to break. It will be more than just the rule of money, it will be the rule of technics. Thank you for listening. And if you're interested to learn more about Spengler and read his The Decline of the West, you're most cordially invited to buy our course on Spengler. The link to enroll is in the description of this video. Thank you very much.